My invitation card was snatched directly from my fingers and torn in half right in front of my face. The pieces floated down onto the polished marble floor of the grand ballroom. I stood frozen in the grand entrance hall as a woman wearing a floor-length emerald silk gown gave me a cold, dismissive look, taking a step closer to whisper so that only the uniformed security guards could hear. She told me that a cheap working-class girl who spent her days scrubbing dirt off old museum pieces had no business standing among true society patrons. $0 and zero status were assigned to my name on their official guest registry. Without a second thought, she handed me a laminated plastic badge attached to a plain black lanyard. It was a staff pass for the catering crew, complete with an instruction to report immediately to the service entrance behind the kitchen. I stood motionless under the massive crystal chandeliers, looking down at the plastic badge in my palms. At the main table, glowing under the warm spotlight, sat my husband and his family, sipping vintage champagne and exchanging laughs with city officials. For 7 years, I had quietly built the foundation of their high society reputation, funding their lifestyle, authenticating their private acquisitions, and covering their hidden debts behind closed doors. They genuinely believed they had put me in my place, reducing my entire existence to a servant standing by the kitchen doors. But as I slid the laminated badge into my purse, my fingers brushed against something else. A quiet, unbothered calm settled over me. They were so blinded by their own arrogance that they never noticed who was arriving through the VIP entrance at the far end of the hall. What I had waiting for them was about to change everything and make them realize they had signed their own downfall. Within less than 2 hours, the entire room would witness the true cost of their pride. My name is Layla Smith. I am 34 years old and I work as a senior art restoration expert and master authenticator for International Museum Foundations. To understand how I ended up standing near the kitchen doors of the city's most exclusive charity gala, holding a servant's badge, you have to look at the last 7 years of my life. When I married Gabriel Smith, he was a mid-level manager at his family's struggling regional development firm. His mother, Rebecca, operated a nonprofit arts foundation that was constantly on the brink of insolvency due to her lavish personal spending and complete lack of financial discipline. From the very beginning, my profession as a senior art authenticator and restoration expert was treated by the Smith family not as a distinguished career, but as a convenient, free utility. Over the course of our marriage, I quietly became the invisible structural wall holding their entire public image together. While my sister-in-law Mila posed as an up-and-coming art dealer on social media, it was my expertise, my international contacts, and my endless hours of labor that built her credibility. I personally authenticated over 30 private collections for her clients, prepared detailed provenance reports without charging a single dollar in consulting fees, and restored damaged 19th century oil paintings in my home workshop late into the night after finishing my regular shifts at the Museum Foundation. If I had billed the Smith family at standard industry rates for the work I provided over those 7 years, the invoice would have easily exceeded $400,000. Instead, my contribution was systematically erased and devalued. My mother-in-law, Rebecca, made a habit of introducing me at high society dinners as Gabriel's quiet wife who does some restoration work in her spare time. Whenever I brought up the idea of opening my own independent appraisal gallery, Gabriel would brush it off, claiming that my primary duty was to support his family's rising status and help Mila build her brand first. I paid for our shared household expenses out of my own museum salary, covered Gabriel's personal credit card overdrafts when his company bonuses fell short, and even funded a $50,000 emergency loan to keep Rebecca's foundation from facing an embarrassing public audit 2 years ago. The true depth of their parasite mindset became clear 3 months ago. My sister-in-law Mila secured an agreement to co-host tonight's annual Metropolitan Art and Charity Gala, a high-profile event attended by the wealthiest investors, developers, and collectors in the state. The entire Smith family saw this gala as their ultimate ticket into the top tier of high society. My father-in-law, Alan, desperately needed to network with major financial sponsors to fund a commercial land acquisition, while Rebecca wanted to solidify her position as the head of the gala board. 3 weeks before the event, Rebecca came to my workshop with a leather-bound catalog. She explained that the centerpiece of the gala's fundraising auction was a rare, unregistered 18th century Italian landscape painting gifted by an anonymous private donor. The auction house required a certified bulletproof authentication report from an accredited master expert before accepting the piece into the catalog. Without that certification, the centerpiece item could not be sold, and the gala would lose its primary attraction. Rebecca placed her hands together, put on a sweet maternal smile, and asked me to perform the appraisal, draft the official provenance dossier, and sign my name as the certifying expert, all free of charge, as a gift to the family. I spent 80 hours examining the canvas under ultraviolet light, analyzing pigment samples, and tracing historical registries across 3 European archives to produce a flawless 30-page authentication report. I handed the completed file directly to Gabriel, believing that my hard work would finally earn an ounce of genuine respect from his family. When the formal invitation box for the gala arrived at our house last week, I opened it expecting to find my name listed alongside Gabriel's at the main family table. Instead, inside was a single ticket tucked into the back pocket of the envelope. Attached was a handwritten note from Rebecca, stating that space at the head tables was strictly reserved for high-value donors, corporate sponsors, and individuals of significant social standing. She suggested that I attend in a supportive capacity to assist Mila behind the scenes with the artwork display. When I confronted Gabriel in our living room, holding the note in my hand, he didn't even look up from his tablet. He casually told me that my presence at the main table would look out of place next to the city's prominent real estate moguls and socialites. He added that my dress style was too plain, my job was too transactional, and that I should be grateful just to have access to the venue. That was the moment the final blindfold fell from my eyes. I realized that to the Smith family, I was never a loved member, a partner, or an equal. I was merely a skilled laborer to be exploited in secret and hidden away when the lights came on. Instead of breaking down or causing a scene in our living room, a cold, surgical clarity took over my mind. As an art authenticator, my entire career is built on examining micro details, detecting subtle counterfeits, and tracing hidden paper trails that others miss. I realized it was time to apply that exact same forensic scrutiny to my own marriage and the Smith family business. At 5 o'clock the following morning, while Gabriel was still fast asleep, I walked quietly into his home office and booted up the shared network drive. Over the past 3 years, Gabriel had frequently used my high-resolution scanner and digital signature pad to upload corporate documents for his family's business. I initiated a comprehensive digital audit of every file, contract, and bank transfer cached on the local drive. What I uncovered over the next 3 hours went far beyond mere emotional disrespect. It was a systematic criminal exploitation of my professional credentials. In a hidden subfolder labeled under Mila's Gallery project, I discovered digital copies of my official master authenticator seal and my official signature. My sister-in-law had systematically forged my signature on over 14 private appraisal certificates for high-ticket artwork sold through her gallery. She had been charging her wealthy clients premium authentication fees, ranging from $15,000 to $30,000 per painting, claiming I had personally inspected and verified each piece while keeping every single dollar for herself. Even worse was what I found in Rebecca's nonprofit foundation records. The $50,000 emergency loan I had given my mother-in-law 2 years ago to cover her foundation's shortfalls was never deposited into the charity's operational account. Instead, the funds were wired directly into a private shell company registered in Panama under Gabriel's name. My husband had been using my hard-earned savings to finance a luxury lease on an oceanfront condo in Miami, complete with recurring monthly charges at high-end restaurants, luxury boutiques, and jewelry stores. To verify the physical destination of these transactions, I contacted Rachel Thomas, a trusted independent auditor and legal investigator based in the city. Working under strict confidentiality, Rachel ran a full corporate search on the Panama entity and cross-referenced the bank routing numbers. By mid-afternoon, Rachel delivered a certified 25-page forensic report. The evidence was absolute and undeniable. Gabriel had not only stolen my savings to fund his secret secondary lifestyle, but he and his sister had also committed multiple counts of corporate wire fraud, identity theft, and commercial forgery using my professional license. My investigation did not stop with the financial records. I needed to examine the true origin of the centerpiece painting for tonight's gala, the 18th century Italian landscape that I had spent 80 hours authenticating for Rebecca's foundation. I pulled up the digitized provenance records I had compiled from the European archives. When I cross-referenced the master catalog number with the private registry of international art trusts, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with devastating precision. The anonymous donor listed on the gala catalog was not an anonymous benefactor at all. The painting belonged to the private international art trust owned by David Rodriguez, the world-renowned billionaire, philanthropist, and chief patron of the Global Arts Council. 3 years ago, I had spent 2 months in Switzerland restoring and authenticating a priceless 17th century master collection for David Rodriguez's family trust. During that time, David had come to deeply respect my work, my integrity, and my refusal to compromise on professional ethics. He considered me one of the finest authenticators in the country. My mother-in-law, Rebecca, had acquired the Italian landscape on temporary loan from David Rodriguez's trust under the strict contractual condition that it would be auctioned tonight to fund an international children's art initiative. However, in the internal gala contract drafts I found on Gabriel's computer, Rebecca and Alan had secretly altered the auction terms. They planned to divert 80% of the proceeds from David Rodriguez's painting into Alan's commercial real estate firm under the guise of an administrative development fee. They were using David Rodriguez's prestige and my certified authentication report to execute a multi-million-dollar scam right in front of the entire city. Sitting in my workshop surrounded by my restoration tools, I carefully printed out 3 complete copies of the forensic audit, the certified forgery report from Rachel Thomas, and the original unedited loan contract from David Rodriguez's trust. I bound them into sleek black leather folders. The Smith family believed I was a quiet, naive worker who would sit meekly at the service table near the kitchen, too intimidated by their fake social status to fight back. They had no idea that every single piece of evidence required to destroy their reputation, their business, and their freedom was sitting securely inside my leather purse. The level of arrogance displayed by Gabriel and his family reached its peak during the hour leading up to the main charity auction. As the ballroom filled with over 300 wealthy guests, city officials, and international art collectors, I stayed in my assigned position near the back of the hall by the service corridor. I watched as my mother-in-law, Rebecca, glided across the polished floor in her emerald gown, soaking in the compliments from guests who congratulated her on organizing the event of the season. Around 7:30, while the catering staff was busy preparing the first course, Gabriel walked over to the service corridor where I was standing. He held a crystal glass of champagne in his hand, and his expression was filled with condescension. He didn't ask how I was doing, nor did he offer me a glass of water. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, adjusted his designer tuxedo, and looked down at my simple dark navy dress. "I see you managed to find the service entrance without making a scene, Layla," Gabriel said in a quiet, mockingly gentle tone. "I hope you realize we did you a favor by letting you come tonight. Look around this room. These are people who own banks, real estate empires, and private galleries. You simply don't fit in here, and pretending otherwise would only make you look foolish." I looked at my husband, maintaining a calm, unbothered composure. I didn't raise my voice, nor did I show a single trace of anger. "If my presence is so uncomfortable for you, Gabriel, why was my master authenticator seal required on the centerpiece auction painting?" I asked softly. Gabriel let out a short, dismissive laugh and took a sip of his champagne. "Don't flatter yourself, Layla," he whispered, taking a step closer so the passing waiters wouldn't hear. "You did a routine technical job that any junior museum technician could have done. My mother and Mila are the ones who turned that painting into a multi-million-dollar opportunity. You provide the manual labor, and we provide the vision and the status. That's how this family works." Before I could reply, my sister-in-law Mila approached us, her diamond earrings sparkling under the venue lights. She gave me a tight, fake smile and handed me a stack of glossy promotional brochures for her gallery. "Layla, since you're standing right next to the entrance, make yourself useful and pass these out to guests as they head toward the main bar," Mila said casually, without a hint of hesitation. "And please, if anyone asks about the authentication on the landscape painting, just tell them my gallery handled the entire process. We don't need guests getting confused by hearing about a background museum restorer. They genuinely believed that their emotional blackmail and patronizing words would keep me quiet and obedient. They thought that by relegating me to the service area, they had effectively stripped me of my voice and my dignity." 10 minutes later, Rebecca joined them near the service entrance. She looked at me with cold, calculating eyes and placed a hand on Gabriel's arm. "Gabriel, make sure she stays back here once the main bidding starts," Rebecca instructed in a low voice. "David Rodriguez's private representatives are arriving shortly, and I want the head table to look impeccable. We cannot have Layla wandering around trying to chat with high-profile donors about her restoration workshop. It projects the wrong image for our foundation." I looked at the 3 of them standing together, a family consumed by greed, living off stolen money, forged signatures, and fake prestige. They were so focused on protecting their fragile social illusion that they failed to notice the sudden shift in energy near the main entrance. The heavy double doors of the grand ballroom swung open, and the lead security detail stepped aside. A distinguished gentleman in a bespoke charcoal suit walked into the room, accompanied by 2 personal assistants and the chairman of the Global Arts Council. It was David Rodriguez. My father-in-law, Alan, immediately rushed toward him with a wide, servile smile, motioning for Rebecca, Gabriel, and Mila to follow him so they could claim the billionaire's attention before anyone else. They walked away from me with swift, triumphant steps, convinced that they were about to seal the deal that would secure their fortune forever. They had no idea that David Rodriguez hadn't come to praise them. He had come because of a private phone call I had made to his personal assistant 3 hours earlier. My father-in-law, Alan, stepped directly into David Rodriguez's path, offering a broad, practiced handshake while bowing slightly with exaggerated respect. Rebecca rushed to align herself at his side, smoothing her emerald dress and putting on her grandest, most refined smile. "Mr. Rodriguez, what an absolute honor to welcome you to our annual gala," Alan declared loudly, making sure the surrounding guests took notice. "My wife, Rebecca, has personally curated tonight's auction centerpiece, your exquisite 18th century Italian landscape. We are prepared to handle the transaction with the highest level of discretion and elegance." David Rodriguez stopped. He did not take Alan's outstretched hand. His sharp, dark eyes scanned the group standing before him, Alan, Rebecca, Gabriel, and Mila, with a look of cold, calculating scrutiny. His personal assistant, standing half a step behind him, held a slim leather tablet ready to take notes. "Curated by your wife?" David Rodriguez asked, his deep voice carrying a natural, commanding authority that instantly silenced the surrounding chatter. "That is interesting, considering the loan agreement for my trust's painting explicitly required certification by an accredited master authenticator, not a nonprofit board member." Rebecca's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly recovered, waving her hand dismissively. "Oh, of course, Mr. Rodriguez," Rebecca said smoothly, leaning in slightly. "We had a junior technician perform the routine verification work in the background, but my daughter Mila's gallery handled the high-level provenance and presentation. We ensure that only the most qualified individuals represent your masterpiece." David Rodriguez's expression turned entirely to stone. He did not say a word to Rebecca. Instead, he looked past her shoulder, searching the perimeter of the room until his eyes locked onto the service corridor near the kitchen doors. A faint smile touched his lips as he recognized me. Without giving Alan or Rebecca another second of his attention, David Rodriguez took a step sideways, walked directly past the stunned Smith family, and began making his way across the grand ballroom toward the back corner. Alan and Rebecca exchanged bewildered, panicked glances. Gabriel frowned, taking a quick step after the billionaire. "Mr. Rodriguez?" Gabriel called out, his voice laced with sudden anxiety. "The head table is in the opposite direction. Please, allow us to escort you to your VIP seats." David Rodriguez ignored him completely. The entire room watched in complete silence as the most powerful art patron in the country walked straight to the service entrance, stopping right in front of me. "David," I said quietly, giving him a polite nod. "Layla," David Rodriguez replied, his tone instantly shifting from cold detachment to genuine warmth and profound respect. He extended his hand, wrapping mine in a firm, warm clasp. "It is an honor to see you again. My assistant informed me that you were here, though I certainly did not expect to find the premier master authenticator in the region standing next to the kitchen doors wearing a servant's badge." A collective gasp echoed through the guests standing nearby. Gabriel froze in his tracks, his face draining of all color. Rebecca's jaw dropped, and Mila clutched her brochure stack so tightly that the paper crumpled in her hands. What did you just call her?" Alan stammered, rushing over with sweat glistening on his forehead. "Mr. Rodriguez, there must be a mistake. This is Layla. She is my son's wife. She just does basic restoration work in her spare time." "Silence, Alan," David Rodriguez commanded, turning his head slowly to glare at my father-in-law with pure disdain. "Mrs. Smith is not a basic restorer. 3 years ago, when my family trust was targeted by an international forgery ring, Layla spent 2 months in Zurich saving a $40 million collection with her brilliant forensic analysis. She is one of the most respected, uncompromising authenticators in the global art world." David turned back to me, his eyes filled with a serious, protective focus. "Layla, 3 hours ago, your legal counsel delivered a forensic report to my personal office regarding the auction contracts for my painting. David said, his voice echoing clearly across the silent hall. "Is it true that this family forged your master seal, stolen your private savings, and attempted to divert 80% of my charity donation into their private commercial accounts?" I looked directly into Gabriel's terrified eyes, reached into my purse, and pulled out the thick black leather dossier. "Every single word in that report is backed by certified evidence, David," I replied, my voice steady, clear, and utterly unshakable. "And the proof is right here. If you discovered that your spouse and their family were using your professional license to commit forgery while hiding you near the kitchen doors, would you expose them publicly in front of 300 elite guests, or would you handle it privately behind closed doors? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below." The silence in the grand ballroom was so complete that you could hear the quiet hum of the air conditioning units above. 300 guests, including city council members, major property developers, and prominent journalists, stood frozen in place, watching the scene unfold. David Rodriguez took the black leather folder from my hands and opened it. His personal assistant stepped forward with a high-resolution portable scanner and immediately projected the document pages onto the venue's massive twin display screens, the very screens that were supposed to show the promotional video for Rebecca's foundation and Alan's commercial expansion. Gasps of utter shock filled the room. Illuminated in crisp, bright detail on the 20-foot screens were the side-by-side forensic comparisons of my official signature against the digitized forgery used by Mela's gallery. Below it were the bank transaction logs proving that Gabriel had funneled $50,000 of my personal savings into a Panamanian shell company, alongside the unedited loan contract showing that Rebecca planned to pocket 80% of the charity auction proceeds. My mother-in-law, Rebecca, let out a choked gasp, clutching her throat as her face turned a ghostly shade of white. This is a misunderstanding," Alan stammered, his voice cracking as he looked around at the hostile, disgusted faces of his business peers. "Mr. Rodriguez, please. My daughter-in-law is bitter about family matters. The documents are fabricated." "Fabricated?" David Rodriguez replied, his voice slicing through the air like a razor blade. "This forensic report is certified by a senior court expert, and as the owner of the artwork, I am filing immediate criminal charges for wire fraud, forgery, and grand larceny." David turned to two plainclothes police officers who had been standing near the VIP entrance. The officers my legal investigator, Rachel Thomas, had briefed earlier that afternoon. "Officers," David said calmly, pointing toward Gabriel, Rebecca, and Mela. "These individuals have engaged in systemic corporate forgery and criminal fraud involving my private trust and Mrs. Layla Smith's professional license." Gabriel's eyes widened in sheer terror. As the two officers approached him, he dropped his champagne glass, which shattered loudly on the marble floor. "Layla, please," Gabriel pleaded, his voice trembling as he tried to grab my arm. "Tell them it's a mistake. We're married. We can fix this at home. You can't do this to my family." I stepped back, looking at him with a cold, unbothered detachment that cut deeper than any scream or outburst ever could. "You did not treat me like family when you took my savings to fund your private luxury condo, Gabriel," I said, my voice echoing clearly across the silent hall. "You did not treat me like family when you forged my seal or when you handed me a servant's badge and told me I belonged near the kitchen doors. You treated me as a resource to be exploited. And now you will face the consequences of your own choices." The officers placed Gabriel, Rebecca, and Mela in handcuffs right in front of the entire high society crowd. Flashbulbs went off as several guests pulled out their phones, capturing the exact moment the Smith family's fragile illusion of prestige disintegrated into complete disgrace. Alan tried to protest, but the venue's head of security stepped in, informing him that his company's sponsorship was officially terminated and that he was banned from the premises effective immediately. Within 5 minutes, Alan's commercial real estate investors walked out of the hall, openly canceling their funding commitments on the spot. David Rodriguez turned to the gala's master of ceremonies and took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," David announced to the room, "tonight's auction of the Italian landscape will proceed under my direct supervision. 100% of the proceeds will go directly to the Children's Art Initiative, administered exclusively by the master authenticator who saved this masterpiece, Mrs. Layla Smith." A thunderous applause broke out across the ballroom. High-profile collectors and museum directors stepped forward, offering their handshakes and expressing their deepest respect for my work. David Rodriguez gestured toward the head table at the front of the room. "Layla," he said with a warm, respectful smile, "your place was never near the service entrance. Please, Join us at the head table." I looked at Gabriel one last time as he was led out of the ballroom in handcuffs, his head bowed in absolute humiliation. Then I turned back to David, held my head high, and walked toward the front of the room, leaving the ruins of the Smith family's pride behind me forever. 6 months have passed since the night of the Metropolitan Art and Charity Gala, and the fallout from that evening completely reshaped the lives of everyone involved. The legal consequences for the Smith family were swift and unyielding. With the certified forensic dossier and David Rodriguez's legal team backing the prosecution, Gabriel was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for wire fraud, forgery, and criminal grand larceny. The court issued a strict restitution order forcing him to repay every single dollar of my stolen savings, along with liquidating his interest in the Miami condo. My sister-in-law, Mila, had her commercial art license permanently revoked. Her gallery was forced into liquidation to pay off civil lawsuits filed by former clients whose appraisal certificates she had forged using my master seal. Rebecca's nonprofit foundation was dissolved by judicial order after a state audit revealed years of systemic financial misappropriation. Alan's commercial real estate firm went bankrupt within 90 days after every major investor pulled their capital, unable to distance themselves fast enough from the family's public disgrace. They tried sending me emotional letters through their bankruptcy attorney, begging me to show leniency, but I never opened them. Some chapters are meant to be closed permanently, without regret or hesitation. My divorce from Gabriel was finalized without him receiving a single cent from my assets, my workshop, or my professional earnings. Today, my life is grounded in a deep, unshakable peace. With the support of international museum trusts and the Global Arts Council, I launched my own independent art authentication and conservation firm. We operate out of a beautiful, sunlit studio in the historic district, employing a team of brilliant young restorers who are paid fairly and treated with the dignity they deserve. David Rodriguez remains one of my most valued professional partners, and together we have built a nonprofit foundation that protects authentic historic artwork and funds art education for underprivileged students across the country. Looking back at that night in the grand ballroom, I realized that the hardest part of my journey was not gathering the evidence or facing my husband's family. The hardest part was breaking free from the quiet, insidious belief that keeping the peace at the expense of my own self-respect was an act of loyalty. For 7 years, I allowed a greedy family to treat my expertise as a free utility and my quiet nature as weakness. I had to learn that true strength does not lie in how much disrespect you can silently endure to hold a broken marriage together. True strength is the courage to stand up, look people in the eye, and enforce firm, uncompromising boundaries against those who seek to use you. Never let anyone convince you that your skill, your labor, or your quiet dedication makes you inferior to those who rely on noise and fake prestige. People who build their lives on illusions will always try to dim your light to hide their own darkness. But when you stand firmly on a foundation of truth, competence, and self-dignity, no one in the world can ever assign you to the service table.